Can you imagine? After so many attempts, the person you care about and trust falls back into their old habits again? I've sent him to rehab countless times, and every time he did really well, you know. But then, after each attempt, he would relapse. And you know what? I feel like I've been deceived, set up. I can't believe someone like him would face these kinds of doubts. And if you hear the same story from a million people, can you really not question if something much bigger is going on? This story is no longer just a personal failure. It's a conspiracy, a carefully orchestrated plan that even those involved may not fully understand. It all started at a historic moment. Rick Harrison, the man who once won America's heart through Pawn Stars, was sentenced to life in prison for a series of serious federal charges: money laundering, smuggling antiques, and tax evasion. A verdict that sent shockwaves, and within minutes, a video of that moment began spreading like wildfire. America was stunned, and the media world erupted. Old questions, ones no one dared ask before, were now being exposed. A public figure, once an icon, had collapsed before the public's eyes, forcing everyone to ask, was this just a mistake, or is there something deeper going on? Hello, everyone. If you're curious about the story of Rick Harrison's downfall and the doubts surrounding his case, leave a comment with the number 1. If not, leave a comment with the number 0. And don't forget to share this video with everyone around you. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on other exciting videos. Now, let's dive into the story. Once known as the witty man behind the most famous pawn shop in the country, Rick is now behind bars and seen as a criminal. But is that the whole story? Or is there something deeper, a larger game at play, where Rick is just a pawn? Whispers began echoing throughout the public. Did this man truly commit these crimes, or are we merely witnessing a carefully staged sentence from the shadows? Rick's raw, agonized reaction, choking with emotion, became the focal point, the painful moment that made people stop and wonder if we're witnessing the fall of a man or the burial of a hidden truth. Rick Harrison before the fall. Rick Harrison was never a typical TV star. He didn't come from the entertainment industry, was never trained in acting, and had no image consultants shaping his persona. Rick's public image wasn't created in a studio. It was built over time through the twists and turns of his real-life journey, a path marked by challenges, resilience, and unexpected opportunities. Born in 1965 in Lexington, North Carolina, Rick faced one of the most isolating and psychologically damaging conditions a child can face: epilepsy. Uncontrolled seizures, stigma from classmates, and the fear of never living a normal life left deep emotional scars. But instead of knocking him down, it forged his determination. His illness didn't crush his spirit. It pushed him to rise. Eventually, his family moved to Buster, Las Vegas, a brutal yet bright city. Along with his father, Richard Oldman Harrison, Rick opened the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop in 1989. Starting with limited capital, their goal wasn't just to survive, but to change the perception of the pawn business, an industry often associated with scams and exploitation. Rick helped turn the shop into a place with historical depth, where every item told a story and every transaction became a cultural exchange. He broke into television in 2009 when the History Channel aired a reality show about their shop. No one expected it to explode in popularity. The Pawn Stars were not just buying and selling goods. It was a smart blend of history, culture, family, humor, and sharp business skills. Rick was the leader, someone who could identify an Edo katana sword, assess the authenticity of Roman coins, and make quick, sound business decisions without a script. To the public, Rick became the embodiment of practical intelligence. He wasn't flashy or boastful, but approachable and witty. His signature bargaining style mixed with dry humor became his trademark. His firm handshake, sincere advice, and bond with his father, business partner, and mentor painted the portrait of a man who was both tough and sincere. That authenticity made the audience trust Rick almost unconditionally. The Pawn Stars weren't about drama or scandal like most reality shows. It was slow, thoughtful, and emotionally grounded. That's why the shock didn't just come from the severity of the charges when news of Rick's investigation and life sentence broke. It came from the deep emotional betrayal. People couldn't believe Rick had done wrong because for over a decade, they had trusted an image that seemed real. So, when Rick cried and shouted that he had been set up, many chose to believe him immediately because deep down, they believed Rick couldn't be a criminal. But was that belief based on truth, or had faith clouded our judgment? The beginning of the fall, from a tax audit to federal charges. No one could have predicted that Rick Harrison's downfall wouldn't start with a dramatic crash, but with something seemingly harmless. A routine tax audit in 2018 for a business that had been running for nearly 3 decades, featured on national television, and attracted millions of tourists every year. People expected audits, but this time the IRS investigators found much more than just a few irregularities in the books. They discovered traces of a complex financial network, suspicious transactions, and untraceable cash flow. What started as a routine IRS audit soon expanded to involve the FBI, Civil Enforcement Bureau, and the Department of Justice. Within months, the audit turned into a full-scale federal criminal investigation. The focus shifted from Harrison Enterprises, Inc. and the owner of the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop, who was accused of money laundering, trafficking in illegal artifacts, and ultimately being linked to a global antique smuggling network. According to prosecutors, Rick Harrison was suspected of being part of a financial system designed to launder money from the trade of unverified origin artifacts. These items ranged from ancient Greek coins, Egyptian statues, and 17th-century European paintings to relics from indigenous cultures. Many of these items had been funneled into the store through intermediaries. Some were traced back to stolen museum collections or illegal archaeological sites. What elevated the case to national and international significance was not just the nature of the items, but also the global scope of the network. According to the indictment, transactions crossed borders with shell companies based in Malta, Panama, and Switzerland. This network was alleged to be connected to wealthy collectors and organized crime groups operating in the shadows of cultural and financial sectors. Authorities seized numerous internal assets, encrypted emails, banking data, and testimonies from former employees that pointed to a large sum of cash being funneled into the system through the purchase of artifacts and reselling them to international buyers. Rick was accused of orchestrating or knowingly allowing this system to operate in his shop. Rick's initial response was to deny. He declined media interviews, offering only a brief statement through his lawyer. "We operate transparently, legally, and according to industry regulations." But this silence only deepened public suspicion. While fans clung to Rick's sharp, witty, and ethical image, the media began painting a very different portrait. Rick was not just the heir to a porn empire, but also a cultural manipulation machine built to profit. Public opinion became divided. On one side, there were those who believed Rick was a man of the people, a victim of a system targeting him for being too famous and too successful. On the other side, there were those who saw him as a shrewd businessman, well-versed in the rules, exploiting every loophole, and willing to dance on the gray line between legality and ethics. Under growing pressure, the FBI raided the gold and silver pawn shop in early 2019. Television cameras that once captured multi-million-dollar transactions now showed agents seizing documents, computers, artifacts, and stacks of cash from a back room. The footage ripped away the healthy facade of a show once praised as one of the cleanest reality TV programs in America. When the final indictment was made public, the shock came soon after. Federal tax evasion, money laundering through foreign entities, trafficking in stolen cultural property, using foreign bank accounts to conceal profits, and connections to internationally investigated organizations. Each charge could carry a sentence of 10 to 25 years. Together, they painted a future where Rick might never be free again. Legal analysts weighed in. Some argued that the case had been politicized, that Rick had been turned into a scapegoat to send a message to those profiting from cultural exploitation. Others believed it was the inevitable consequence of unchecked financial and media power lasting too long. Rick remained silent. Close sources said he had been devastated, suffering from insomnia and feeling betrayed. However, he is also said to be preparing a counterattack, not through legal moves, but through something much more personal: his voice, his emotions, his humanity. He believes that could awaken the public to what he calls a fabricated case. And he did so in a historic moment at court, where not only was he sentenced, but he also forced the world to listen to the final plea of a man once celebrated as a national icon. But to understand what really happened in that fateful moment, we must turn to the next chapter when Rick faces his life sentence: the fateful trial. On the morning of the sentencing, the federal court in Nevada was packed. A tense atmosphere hung in the air like a thick fog. Journalists lined up outside the gates. Supporters gathered with banners backing Rick Harrison, while protesters stood silently holding the indictment as a reminder of the truth. Inside, Rick sat at the defense table, his eyes sunken from exhaustion. However, his posture remained upright. After nearly 2 years of investigation and 6 months of testimony, he was about to hear the final verdict, a verdict that would change the rest of his life. The proceedings in the final days of the trial went beyond legal technicalities. Every charge had been contested: ambiguous financial transactions, physical evidence that had been seized, testimony from former employees. Now, the focus had shifted to the man himself. What would Rick Harrison say? And more importantly, what would he convince the court to believe? Rick's attorney, a seasoned lawyer with over 20 years of experience in high-profile criminal cases, presented a surprising strategy. Not focusing on disproving the evidence, but emphasizing Rick's moral character and humanitarian legacy. He argued that Rick was a hardworking individual who had unknowingly been pulled into dubious transactions. Not a mastermind, but a pawn manipulated by a much larger cultural financial machine being peeled back layer by layer. Rick was a son, a father, a television icon, and a good citizen. The alleged wrongdoings do not warrant a life sentence, the lawyer told the jury. However, the climax did not come from the defense, but from Rick Harrison himself after being allowed to speak in court for the final time before sentencing. He stood up, holding a crumpled piece of paper, and looked the judge in the eye. In the suffocating silence, he began in a hoarse voice. "I'm not here to beg for mercy. I'm here to speak the truth, whether it saves me or not." The entire courtroom fell silent. "I have been set up," Rick continued, his voice trembling but steady. "This is a conspiracy. Not because I committed a crime, but because I succeeded too quickly, too clearly, and refused to submit to the dark demands behind this industry." He paused, scanning the room, still lingering on his family. His wife's red-rimmed eyes gave a slight nod. His son Corey held his hand firmly, yet helplessly in Rick's gaze. Rick turned back to the judge. "I built a legacy with my own hands. I inspired millions to believe that history is not just confined to books, but is within our reach. On a coin, an old gun, an ancient map, and now they call me a criminal." His voice began to shake. "They don't credit me for the items I've sold. They prosecute me because I refuse to submit. I refuse to sell the rights to the show. I refuse to be the face of products I deemed unethical." Then suddenly every door slammed shut. "Deals I thought were legal are now deemed criminal. I've become a symbol of greed when, in truth, I've protected what I've built." Rick fell silent. No one spoke. The tension in the courtroom reached its peak. He stared at the judge, unwavering. "If today I must receive a life sentence without parole, let me say one last thing. I don't regret living honestly. I don't regret refusing to be manipulated. I only regret not being prepared for a world where truth has no value." Rick then lowered his head. According to a reporter from The Guardian at the scene, that moment was a blend of Shakespearean drama and modern tragedy. A public figure not collapsing but screaming in desperation, using every last bit of emotion to defend himself. After his speech, the judge left the bench for a few minutes before returning. The sentence was handed down: life without the possibility of parole. The reason: persistent violations causing significant harm and insufficient evidence to prove Rick's complete innocence. Cameras focused on Rick, but he did not cry. He stood tall, adjusted his suit, and embraced his son. Without saying a word, just with a defiant look. The media immediately broadcast Rick's statement. Within 48 hours, it had garnered over 50 million views across platforms. From Twitter to TikTok, from Reddit to legal forums, fierce debates erupted. Did Rick speak the truth, or was this his final move to sway public opinion and gain skepticism? Media experts pondered. Some people have analyzed Rick's body language, his unwavering eye contact, his trembling voice but steady, signs of tightly controlled emotions. Others note that his frequent use of key phrases like setup and legacy was a linguistic tactic designed to evoke audience empathy and divert attention from the legal evidence. Whether true or not, Rick achieved one thing. He sparked a nationwide debate. No one was talking about the items seized from his shop anymore. No one was mentioning the offshore entities. What dominated the discussion was emotion, the tears, the statement, and "I don't regret living honestly." And it was at that moment that conspiracy theories began to take root, nurtured by a belief, suspicion, and fear that justice could be manipulated by unseen forces. Conspiracy theories. Who is Rick a victim of? The moment Rick Harrison's tearful clip stating "I've been set up" went viral on social media platforms, a series of conspiracy theories began to surface from the shadows. Conspiracy theories have long been a byproduct of high-profile cases, but now they became the main topic of public discussions. And in Rick Harrison's statement, they weren't baseless rumors. On the contrary, they were based on scattered details, seemingly unrelated, that were pieced together in a coldly convincing manner. The first and most widely circulated theory suggests that Rick refused to sell the rights to his Pawn Stars to a major media conglomerate, making him the target of an image-smearing campaign. The story began around 2021 when producers sought to reposition the show for deeper commercialization, expanding its format into Asian markets, licensing Rick's image for merchandise, and embedding more active product placements into episodes. According to an insider who worked with the production team, Rick strongly opposed. He believed the show should maintain its authenticity and not become a soulless money-making machine. Shortly after, conspiracy theorists accused him. Not long after, Rick came under tight scrutiny for his taxes. Former allies in the industry turned their backs. The media began questioning the transparency of his business dealings. None of this, they claimed, was a coincidence. If you find this story interesting and want to learn more, don't forget to hit like, share the video, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any exciting upcoming videos. Now let's continue with the story. A much darker theory suggests that Rick refused to participate in a global antique smuggling network. According to an individual on Reddit claiming to be an insider in the international collecting community, Rick was approached by brokers offering artifacts from the Middle East, Eastern Europe, and North Africa, regions rich in relics but rife with legal risks. The aim was to use Rick's fame and shop to launder dubious items. Rick, with extensive knowledge of history and antiquities law, is said to have declined. From that moment on, he became a burden, a dangerous man who knew too much. Eliminating him would require a more sophisticated approach than sheer violence. The law and media would be used to silence him. The question is, do these theories have substance? In reality, Rick Harrison publicly condemned the commercialization of reality TV content. In a 2019 interview, he stated, "I don't do this show to be a superstar. I do it to educate. If I can get a 15-year-old kid interested in history because they hear me talk about a samurai sword, to me, that's success." Those words were once praised. However, today, they are reinterpreted as evidence of his resistance to the very forces profiting from television. For the Antiquities Network, there is no denying that the world of collectibles contains a vast gray area. According to UNESCO, the global illegal antiquities market alone exceeded $10 billion in 2012. Items that seem harmless, a ceramic vase, an ancient manuscript, a tribal mask, could stem from tomb robbing, looting, or even terrorism funding. Rick, as a professional appraiser, surely found himself at the center of that storm. But what is most striking and significant about the third conspiracy theory is that Rick also knew a great deal about secret transactions in Las Vegas and had been legally silenced. Antique speculators often maintain close relationships with powerful economic brokers, from casinos and jewelry dealers to financial institutions appraising illiquid assets. Rick made hundreds of transactions each year, maintaining a vast database of item valuations, ownership, and provenance. Proponents of the conspiracy believe he may have discovered or even held evidence of covert money laundering schemes disguised as antique sales. And if he refused to look the other way, the cleanest way to neutralize him was through the legal system. So why do these theories resonate so strongly? First, because the public wants to believe in Rick's innocence. The notion that a likable public figure, once a symbol of a wholesome family television, could commit a crime triggers psychological resistance. faith is threatened. Instead of accepting the harsh reality that good people can also commit crimes, the audience chooses a more comfortable escape. Rick is the victim. This story allowed them to maintain their ideal image and avoid the sting of betrayal. Rick himself, however, leveraged these conspiracy theories as a media strategy. In his court statement, he not only asserted his innocence, but also sowed doubt by invoking the media forces trying to destroy him and his refusal to bow down. These words struck a chord with the audience, who were already accustomed to the fabricated stories backed by a hidden state apparatus and the true loser, despite the evidence. Rick, a master of media, knew exactly which keywords to deploy to both legally defend himself and evoke public sympathy. However, some experts warn that the power of conspiracy lies in its lack of need for evidence. It only requires suspicion, and that is dangerous. When someone is judged by a legitimate court but the public chooses to believe unproven theories, we enter an era where emotion overshadows law, where personal belief outweighs objective truth. This is not to assert Rick's guilt, but rather to emphasize the need to distinguish empathy from truth. If Rick was truly set up, it must be proven with legal evidence, not just a trembling voice and desperate eyes. If not, society will increasingly be driven by sentiment, and justice will lean toward the latest trend. In conclusion, the conspiracy theories surrounding Rick Harrison not only reflect the complexity of the case, but also highlight a broader societal issue. Public trust is wavering, no longer firmly attached to legal institutions, but drifting toward emotions, speculation, and replacement truths. Whether guilty or not, Rick has become a symbol of an era where justice and media no longer walk the same path. Did Rick Harrison's family stand behind the collapse or move forward? If the courtroom is the place to judge guilt, behind closed doors, family is where the emotional collapse is measured. When Rick Harrison was sentenced to life in prison, the front row of the public gallery was not filled with journalists. Instead, it was his wife, son, and close family members. They did not speak out, hold up banners, or engage in the media storm. But their silence raised a bigger question. Where was Rick's family during his collapse? His son, Corey Big Hose Harrison, his longtime friend and Pawn Stars co-star, became the public focal point after the verdict. Corey grew up in the pawn shop and witnessed his father turn it into a television icon. He was seen as the natural heir to the legacy, both in brand and public image. However, in the days following Rick's sentence, Corey vanished from the public eye. No statements, no appearances, no posts. Some speculated that this silence was a sign of internal collapse, suggesting Corey was distancing himself to salvage his reputation and protect what was left of the business. But sources close to the family said otherwise. Corey's silence wasn't cowardice, but pain. He still believed his father was a good man, but the evidence was too convincing to ignore. Corey was caught between two forces: loyalty to his family and public responsibility to the staff, partners, and the traditional brand. Rick's wife, who had been by his side in the years after his adult film career, spoke to the media only once after the trial. Her statement was brief. "I believe Rick is a good man, but even good men can get lost." That quote was widely cited as a painfully honest, emotional response. She stood by Rick mentally, but not blindly. She didn't protect him at all costs, nor did she cast him aside as a fallen criminal. It was the voice of a woman who had shared life with a man whose public image had grown too large and was now collapsing under its own weight. Other members of the Harrison group, particularly Chumley and others who appeared on the show, also withdrew from the spotlight. People began to wonder if they were silently preparing for a post-Rick era or simply waiting for the chaos to settle before deciding their next move. Beyond the emotional burden of family, a bigger issue emerged: the future of the gold and silver pawn shop. For decades, it had become more than just a business. It was a cultural landmark in Las Vegas. Tourists came not just to buy and sell. They came to meet Rick, take photos with Corey, and experience the world of the adult stars in real life. Now, with Rick convicted and his reputation ruined, could the shop continue as it once was? Industry experts are doubtful. They warn that if the shop doesn't quickly rebrand, it could disappear from the Las Vegas tourist map within 1 to 2 years. A vibrant shop deeply intertwined with the public image of a man must reinvent itself or face its end. But the bigger question is, who will lead that reinvention? Corey could, but is he willing? And more importantly, does he have the strength to step out of the shadow of a father who is both a legend and a convicted man? The answer is still unclear, but one thing is certain. The Harrison family now stands at a crossroads. Every decision they make will shape not only their own future, but how the world remembers them, whether as those who stood up and continued the legacy, or those who crumbled under its weight. Six trials by public opinion. Which tears are real? No one can deny the tidal wave of public reaction after Rick Harrison's emotional statement in court. But what's notable is that this reaction didn't stop at fleeting sympathy. It split the public into two camps. One side praised Rick as a victim of malevolent forces. The other accused him of manipulating emotions to evade accountability. Across social media, hashtags appeared like political slogans. Justice for Rick, Rick was defamed, Ash free Rick Harrison. Millions shared the video of Rick tearfully speaking his final words before sentencing. Pages that once shared lighthearted clips from adult stars turned into legal advocacy channels, posting case analyses, quoting laws, and questioning the alleged conspiracy behind Rick's life sentence. Intense debates quickly erupted everywhere. Mainstream media, particularly networks like CNN, Fox News, and NBC, began analyzing Rick's reaction through a technical lens: body language, rhetorical strategy, and emotional impact tactics. Some TV analysts argued that Rick's performance wasn't entirely spontaneous, but possibly scripted and calculated. Created with an in-depth understanding of how to influence the American psyche, they identified 3 distinct layers of language in Rick's speech: personal language, I am a father, a worker, an inspiration; justice language, I've been set up, I haven't been tried; and symbolic language, I represent the American dream, I am proof of honest success. This framework made the speech not only emotionally powerful, but also strategically resonant, tapping into the broader American belief that the system often punishes those who refuse to play by its rules. But it also raised doubts in academic forums, personal blogs, and editorial columns. Many began labeling Rick's emotional display as a powerful performance, a calculated weakness aimed at regaining public support. They pointed out his tears, trembling voice, and painful looks, tactics famously used by high-profile defendants, from politicians to CEOs, to regain control of the narrative in the courtroom. This raises an important question. Does emotion affect legal judgment in an ideal society? The courtroom, not social media, should decide guilt or innocence. But in the digital age, the public verdict often comes first and louder than any legal ruling. With millions watching, commenting, and resharing daily, Rick's case has transcended a legal trial. It has become an emotional referendum where everyone must choose a side, believe Rick's tears, or trust the FBI's evidence. This leads to a painful question. Which tears are real? If Rick is truly innocent, his sentence is not just a legal mistake, it's a moral failure of the system and society. But if he's guilty, his tears are a masterclass in manipulation, a dangerous precedent where emotional aspects can distort justice. The situation worsened when the media stopped acting as neutral observers and began to take sides. Even the most reputable news platforms were swept up in the emotional wave, chasing views and shares by twisting headlines and editing Rick's words to fit their political angle or audience bias. This information chaos created a dangerous ripple. Public opinion became fragmented. The truth was stretched into multiple versions. And in such a world, even a legitimate trial supported by clear evidence could be dismissed as staged, influenced, or unreliable. Rick Harrison's case exposed this. No one can say for certain that he is completely innocent, but no one dares claim he is definitively guilty either. In the gray space between truth and emotion, doubt grows. Conspiracy theories flourish, and society's trust in justice begins to waver. As a media psychologist observed, Rick didn't just cry in court. He cried before a culture in crisis, a culture that no longer knows who to trust, the adult stars, and the aftermath of reality television. When Rick Harrison shouted, "I've been set up" in court, it wasn't just the collapse of a man. It was a shockwave shaking the foundation of an entire reality TV institution. Rick was not just a player in the game. He was one of the people who helped turn reality television into a cultural phenomenon. And that's why his downfall caused a shockwave in an industry that has turned everyday life into global entertainment. When Pawn Stars premiered in 2009, it redefined reality TV. No manufactured drama, no gimmicks, no over-the-top theatrics, just real unscripted transactions in a pawn shop, where knowledge, integrity, and natural humor were the foundation. Rick Harrison and his son weren't actors, they were themselves. And the audience loved the show because of the authenticity amidst a sea of scripted performances. That authenticity turned the Pawn Stars into a global brand. It sparked an educational entertainment wave where fun and learning coexisted. Millions of Americans learned about world history through an ancient clay vase or a 19th century revolver brought into the shop. Rick didn't just appraise objects, he connected viewers with history, culture, and human values. But when Rick was convicted, the entire structure of the show was called into question. First and foremost, could Pawn Stars exist without Rick? Theoretically, the show could be restructured around secondary actors like Corey or Chumley. But essentially, Pawn Stars could not be separated from Rick, the decision-maker, the leader, and the heart of every episode. Rick was the icon. And when that icon was sentenced to life in prison, the show lost more than its star. It lost the ethical foundation it had built over 14 years. Before the trial, Pawn Stars was considered one of the cleanest brands in reality TV. No scandals, no violence, no harmful content. But now, with its ethical core stripped away by the judicial system, That image has been shattered. Producers in the industry began rethinking how they depict reality on screen, because the uncomfortable truth is that even when a show appears to be real, it is still the product of scripted editing and narrative design. Rick Harrison wasn't just a part of that process. He helped shape his own image. And now, as the trial has exposed the darker corners of his business and personal life, the public faces a question. Are we watching reality, or a polished version made to feel authentic enough? Rick's case also revealed a deeper tension in the industry. Where is the ethical line in reality TV when a person becomes a character, a commercial product, and a public icon? Do they still own their life, or does the system? And when that system earns millions of dollars from their reality, what responsibility does it have when they crumble? After Rick's conviction, many producers grew concerned about the idea of brands being tainted through their representatives, especially shows built around strong personalities. Rick's downfall didn't just leave the adult stars without their leader, it made the audience lose trust. The trust that the show was based on real, genuine people. And that led to a deeper calculation. Can reality TV create an ideal that's too pristine to maintain when shows demand their stars be more real than real life, and the audience expects moral perfection from flawed individuals? Any collapse becomes a catastrophe. Rick may be guilty, or he could be the first victim of a machine that raised him too high, too quickly, with expectations that were too great. The consequences of Rick Harrison's case go beyond just the adult stars. It forces the entire reality TV industry to confront the true meaning of truth. How much of it is authentic, how much is staged, and more importantly, when a person is truly caught up in the entertainment machine, who is responsible when it all collapses? Rick Harrison was once the model for ethical reality TV. Now, with that model shattered, what is lost is not just a beloved character, but the belief that reality TV can be genuine, wholesome, and sustainable. When the courtroom doors closed and Rick Harrison was led away under the watchful eyes of hundreds and the lenses of cameras, a significant chapter in American television quietly closed. But at the same time, another, more complex, more bitter chapter began to unfold. It was no longer the story of a pawn shop owner turned TV star, but now the story of a man who carried both fame and darkness, leaving behind a series of unresolved questions. Rick Harrison's case offers a larger lesson not just about an individual, but about the entire system. Society's belief that fame is more fragile than we think, that the media can lift someone to the heights of success and just as quickly bring them down, that the audience is not just spectators, but the largest jury with the power to forgive. And above all, this case forces us to face the most uncomfortable question of our age, an age where truth and illusion blur. Can we still distinguish between the real person and the image created to please us? Rick Harrison may have lost everything, his freedom, his fame, his reputation, but he left behind something indelible, a complex, controversial, and unforgettable symbol. And as time passes and public opinion cools, his story may still endure. Not because of the truth itself, but because of our profound, unrelenting need to uncover it. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to hit like, share it with your friends and everyone around you. Be sure to comment your thoughts below so we can hear what you think. And don't forget to subscribe to stay updated with the most exciting and latest videos. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next video.